But she's been telling me about this Agenda 21 for a couple of years, and it just, yeah. I put it kind of originally in that conspiracy theory category, but Bev and I have been to a couple meetings recently, and so as some of you have been to some of those other same local meetings. And there were some things that were said at those public meetings that kind of made the hair on the back of my head stand up, and you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach that you know something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. And the more we started researching, we started seeing, connecting the dots, that it all goes back to this UN Agenda 21, which ultimately leads to the New World Order. So it's no longer a conspiracy theory as far as I'm concerned. It's here. There are people in our local governments that are working really hard to implement it. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring, Bev. Oh, I just see Karen Blair just came in. She's one of our city councilmen, and Rob how does he say your last name? Patrick?
Rob Patrick.
Rob Patrick.
You guys want to come up and say something? Or? No.
With Greg Walden's office. Okay.
Who's from Greg Walden's office?
Right here.
I'm Congressman Walden's district director.
Right.
His lawyer. So.
Pleasure.
So we really do want to, one of the things that Lieutenant Powell did kind of an overview for Bev and I this afternoon at Bev's home, and he had some really good ideas about educating our local elected officials and even members of boards, because we feel there are a lot of people that, a lot of elected officials that are being used and don't know it. So not every one of them is the culprit. So.
Is that, can you still hear me, or are you comfortable with it? I don't want to be yelling at everybody, but I at least want to get heard. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what I got involved in. I went to an AFP meeting and ended up as a climate chair because I was somewhat of an analyst in the military. And I also had a couple of other things that I think led me to that, and I'll kind of go through just a little bit of a background of who I am and why I'm here. I was born in Oregon. I'm an Oregon native, and I, unlike a lot of people, escaped high school. I was an over-the-hill kid. I never wanted to sit still. I was probably an ADD kid because I invented the pills for it. And every year I went to work on my grandfather's cattle brokerage farms in South Dakota. By the time I was about 15, I didn't like that anymore, so I fought forest fires for the state. I fought the fire up here by Murphy's Lumberyard or Plywood Mill and Transpasses and things like that. And then I got involved with banking when I got out of high school, and then the draft came. And the draft told me I either went with them or figured out what I was going to do. So I had lived on the coast quite a bit, and so I went into the Coast Guard, was fortunate enough to get past the test. And after that, I started to study. I have kids, and to sort of skip past all that, I found out that one of my ancestors was locked in Fleet Prison in London for preaching the gospel. It was sort of a genealogical thing, which is totally away from what we're doing today in a way, but it just led me to believe he was dedicated in what he did. And an ancestor, a couple of generations after that, came over with William Penn and settled here before they had any Constitution or Bill of Rights or anything else. And they were people, they weren't citizens. And that's something to remember. There's a distinction between those two. And so I kept listening to all this, and then ran into a statement or a quote by Thomas Paine that said, if there's going to be trouble, I'd rather have it on my time and so that my children can be in peace. It's sort of literal, but. And then I ended up at the AFP meeting, and I'd done a lot of research for the Coast Guard. Coast Guard's kind of an analytical service anyway. And so I started putting these things together, and as an ex-appraiser for a banking industry and an analyst for Nike for a while, I put all these little junk jobs I'd done together and realized that something's going on that was not good. And so what I did today is, or what I'm doing today, is coming down to speak to people to help them kind of get a handle on what Agenda 21 is, what it means, and what they're trying to do, both overtly and in behind the scenes. And there's a couple of things that are really important in this, and one of them is that this isn't my material. I think that it's important to get a group of things together from different people to understand there's a collaborative effect to what's going on, and these people that have written the articles we're going to discuss and look at this pamphlet that we're going to discuss all have a better understanding of Agenda 21 than in a sense than I do. They created these articles, they wrote these papers, they are physicists and scientists and educators and so on. In the military, I was I guess you could call it a military instructor, but we owned those people, so it was different. I don't own any of you. So we could sort of control them and whatever. But I taught at the Motor Life School at the Columbia River for 3 years, and it also taught me a lot about psychology, because most of what we did there, although it was weather related, is really psychological. It's like flying an airplane. There's people that just shouldn't do it. And a lot of what my training came about was the ability to figure out who should do it and who shouldn't and so forth. But what I want to start with, if you have a packet in front of you, and on this packet, the very first page is a map. This particular map, it was the map that was put before the Senate when the Senate voted this issue down. This map is a map of the places that they want to move you to. Now, if you look at the three little dots, you'll notice it's called Core Reserves and Corridors. If anybody's been to a national park and you read the National Heritage Park, or you see the little plaque hidden somewhere behind a tree because they don't want you to know, then there's the buffer zones, and then there's what's called smart growth. Remember these terms. These are all code words, and you'll get back, and I'll get you back to these code words later. But the smart growth area is your human settlement. Now, if you hunt around on the map, you can see a few. There's one in Texas. There's a couple down here in Lower California, one in Upper California, San Francisco area. There is Portland, Seattle, and then you move to the East Coast. And that it looks crazy, but it's true. And you can actually Google this map online, and it's interactive. And it will actually show you the movement they want to take you to. Now, I want to stay away from sounding like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, because I don't have enough hair to hold one on, but this was prepared by Freedom Advocates, this booklet, and we're going to go through it just really quickly, because the booklet's not what my main concern is. But this booklet will explain for you what sustainable development that overall term actually means, and it will explain how they're going to implement it, how they're going to control your land use, whether you're a farmer or just own your property, ranchers, everyone. And then there's a few steps on how you can deal with it. We'll deal with the steps too, but what I really want to work on is, inside this packet is a group of articles, and if you haven't mixed them up, that's good, but we can work around it. But the first one is going to be called Oz versus Reality. And you all remember The Wizard of Oz, when they finally get to the end of the road and there's that monkey pulling the cord, you know, the flames and everything. Well, the reason that I put this together is because this is the synthesized wordage and quotes of the people that are in charge of dealing with Agenda 21. What this is a group of statements when they didn't think they were being listened to, quotes that were written and pulled out of documents that they have dealt with. And I marked a couple just for this discussion, and you can read the rest when you take it home. And actually, the first one I'd like to use is called, "We've got to ride this global warming issue even if the theory of global warming is wrong." which it is, by the way. The next one is the models are convenient fictions. And that's David Frame. He's from Oxford University. He, by the way, is a climate modeler, which means he makes up the fake models that they use. They're really serious about this. The global sustainability requires the deliberate quest of poverty. And that's Professor Maurice King. And these are all people, these are about the 30 or 50 leaders. This is all online on they were going to write this up here, but anybody got a black marker in their pocket, like for marking cattle or anything like that? Nope. Anyway, you got a pen? Can you just write it up here with a pen? Maybe they can read it. And there's a website called The Green Agenda. You can Google it. And it's probably 30 pages. Very interesting website. And it's very informative, and it's not done by a nutcracker. The Green Agenda. Yeah, they're just Green Agenda. And I'm going to give you another statement. I'm going to keep moving. We must make this an insecure and inhospitable place for capitalists and their projects. We must reclaim the roads, plowed land, dams, construction. This is David Foreman, co-founder of Earth First. This little group of statements is actually about 10 pages long, but I only pulled out a couple so I can illustrate what is the core beliefs of the people that are pushing this. And it takes a little while to get your head around it. It took me a while to actually understand who was involved in this. And this is one of the places and the reasons I brought you this is because that's their statements. You know, that's not somebody arguing that isn't what they intend. That isn't somebody saying, well, you know, he really didn't mean that, or he'd had too much to drink, or he was photoshopping his picture, or whatever. You know, it's actually them saying what they're going to do. So it's important to understand. Moving to the next item, it's called Agenda 21, a global economic disaster in the making. If you're having trouble understanding what they're wanting to do, it's because it's like a railroad running down the tracks, and they got one wheel on one rail and one wheel on the other rail, and they're duplicitous in that they will say one thing, but they actually mean something else. But they're using code words to make it sound acceptable and actually quite good, as a matter of fact. And so I marked a couple areas in this Agenda 21 of global economic disaster. Multnomah County's charter basically says to live sustainability, one strives to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But those are exactly the same words that are in the United Nations Commission on Environment. What they're doing is they cookie cutter this material, and then they implant it in paperwork and agreements and agenda items and all sorts of paperwork that they push through the local agenda, the county, the city, the state. The state's deeply involved in this right now, and I'll give you the paperwork for that. And essentially they're calling for population redistribution, wealth redistribution, social justice, and food control, and several other things, actually. And so I'm going to go to the third page, but essentially there's another example, and it's called the agenda's Rio Declaration demands that all states and all peoples shall cooperate in the essential task of eradicating poverty as an indispensable requirement for sustainable development in order to decrease disparities in standards of living and better meet the needs of the majority of the people of the world. Okay, now, you all need to know that, well, you probably all know that Great Britain went socialist in 1930, and they've become a second-tier country ever since. They produce really very little, and it takes all of the European Union to make anything. And if you look at Greece right now, Greece is failing, Portugal's failing, France is failing, Germany's failing, and we have a problem because we're going down the same road. And I'm not a party individual. I want to be really careful of this, and I only am interested in AFP because I believe that I have a duty to my ancestors to continue what they're doing and what they died for, and what the kids that are coming are going to do and die for. And so I am in a race for time with myself. And so this is why I'm here. I'm not here because AFP asked me to come here. I'm doing this because people have to understand what's going on, and that's how I feel about it. And I think that in order to understand that, you're going to have to go back to the core values, and we'll go back to this. But these articles that I'm providing you are going to give you the essence of what they want to do, and it's going to give you people's names, different groups, and a better understanding. And then you will understand what's going on in Jackson County. And it's going on in Jackson County. Now, the next item that I'm bringing forward to you is an item called the Cost of Sustainable Development. It's essentially a briefing paper. This man, Henry Lamb, has a site called Sovereignty International, and he's very much a sovereignty lawyer. And they're trying to break up our sovereignty. They want essentially no private property ownership. They want everyone. Have any of you been watching TV where they talked about the Chinese cities that nobody's living in?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason nobody's living in them yet is they haven't finished the process. What China is actually doing is tearing down buildings and moving people out of the small villages. They haven't finished. They haven't really started that part yet because they're not really done with the cities. But what they're going to do, because they don't have private property rights in China, is move everybody into the cities, and they're not going to have to worry about it. If you wonder why they always advertise the Chinese rail train, is because they could put that rail train wherever they wanted and whenever they wanted, because it was not private property. They had no ownership by anybody else. So what you have to understand is that those countries have been totalitarian for so long that our younger kids don't even know what that means. And so, in any case, sovereignty is an issue here. And the United Nations is very interested in getting rid of sovereignty. And so that will come through all of these articles that I'm giving you. But this one is a briefing paper, and it's essentially an understanding paper that we have two choices. We are either the people who run the government, or we will be slaves of another kind, and the government will run us.
Which paper are you on?
I am on the Cost of Sustainable Development. It's called a briefing paper prepared by Henry Lamb, the Executive Vice President, and it's sovereignty.net. You can see it on the bottom. Every one of these articles will have a website at the bottom, which will help you go for further information, okay? And the fourth paragraph in this front page is kind of interesting. If you look at the last actual sentence, minor shifts in policy, marginal adjustments in ongoing programs, moderate improvements in laws and regulations, rhetoric offered in lieu of genuine change. These are all forms of appeasement designed to satisfy the public's desire to believe that sacrifice, struggle, and a wrenching transformation of society will not be necessary. Okay, there are states that have attempted some of this, and some states are backing out of it. Edmonds, Oklahoma, you can Google them online. Edmonds, Oklahoma got rid of ICLEI, which is the UN's, it's an acronym that they no longer use, but it was a UN group that was set up to be a business that was allowed to work inside the United States, even though that's illegal by the United States treaty. And it's voluntary, supposedly, but what they do is they give money out to the cities and counties to join. If you join, you're required to follow the tenets of the UN. It's illegal in the state of Oregon, but we have a problem in the state of Oregon that I want to explain to you. And that is that this state has been one party, and I'm not a party person. I want to be really kind of careful about this, but this state has been one party for so long that they have appointed the judges that are doing the legislating. And all you have to do is look at the finished case to understand why we do not dare bring a constitutional argument before a state judge right now, because frankly, they're not going to rule in your favor. It happened with some very small cases, but they were very important cases. And so right now there are people trying to figure out what else to do about some of this. But that's one of the problems with the state as it is today. And that's something you have to think about in Jackson County. And I'm not telling you how to think about it, but I'm telling you it needs to be thought about, because if you are the people who run this county, you have to control it. And at this point in time, I live in Clackamas County. In Clackamas County, the citizens have no control whatsoever. In 2 years, our budget went from $24 million in debt to $240+ million in debt in 2 years. We are part of Metro. They're trying to put a Metro conglomerate in Lane County now. They tried to tell Clackamas County that they were going to pay for part of the Selwood Bridge. I don't know if anybody drives around in Portland enough to know, but the Selwood Bridge is an old bridge. It was supposed to have been fixed in 1980, but Portland got into this Agenda 21 ICLEI. Portland is an ICLEI city, Multnomah County is not. But Portland gives everything to Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County entered the agreement too. So they decided to tax all 3 counties to pay for the bridge instead of paying for it themselves so they could build light rail. Now, one of the ways you can fight this kind of manipulation is the initiative process. And I suggest that someone who's well-defined and has a reasonable understanding of that look at the initiative process for its ability to protect you. The legislators put that in there on purpose, because of the fear that we're in right now. And that is that you got one party that's overwhelming the process. It could be the Republicans. It could be, I don't know. I'm to the right of Attila the Hun, so don't look at me for party. I'm way past these guys. But, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just I don't much believe in anybody. My cousin worked for the State Department and I worked for the Coast Guard. The State Department and the Coast Guard were incestuous. And we got into things we should have never been in and just stuff. And so I'm just saying that it's important that you get deeper into what you're doing. I know you all have jobs, I know you all have lives, but there are certain people within any group that will be activators and have a little time. That's who I am. I'm partially retired. I have kids and grandkids, and so I'm not really retired. I don't know if you know what that means, but I can guarantee you I'm not retired. But I'm doing this because they have to understand what's going on. And I notice there's a lot of older people in here, but if you have kids and you can get another one of these meetings going on, you drag your kids here whether they want to come screaming or not. Take their video games away and get them in here. Because they don't know what's happening and the school isn't teaching them. Now, in the course of all of this from Henry Lamb, one of the things that's noted in here is the instruction is to not debate the science of greenhouse gas. It does not matter anymore. Well, they're doing it because it in a sense takes away the fact that it is an unskilled science. And in fact, we'll go into that in a little bit. I want to move to the next one now. And the next one is essentially the UN's attempt to create a religion that is benign. And by that I mean most religions are faith-based. And if you really stop and think about that, the Mayans had a religion. You know, the guys on Easter Island, they carved those big, tall faces, you know. Nobody knows how they did it, but they did it. Every group, the Egyptians, everyone, until we got to the Soviet Union in 1917, had a religion. In the Soviet Union, you married the state. You did not marry your wife, and that's different. And that's the first time that we ever had a lack of religion of any kind in a state. Now, the UN, in order to have everybody be the same, and I'll give you the example of this. If you look at countries like Somalia, Somalia's been under UN control since the 90s. And frankly, what it is it looks like about 8 high schools that all got together and had a gang fight. They're tribes. It's a tribal country. There is no control over the country at all. But frankly, the UN does not care. And the reason the UN doesn't care is because that's exactly what they want. And if you look at how we've come, there are some gentlemen that are past what I call puberty, over 25. And you must understand that they want chaos. If you look at what happened in Wisconsin, that's chaos. If you look at what's going on, the lack of civil society and the erosion of civil society allows for someone to come in and say, well, we'll fix it for you. And everybody naturally gravitates to it. I mean, it's normal. It's a human attitude, and it needs to be rethought, and those are important issues. So the next one's called The New Religion, or it's called The New World Religion by William F. Jasper. And there's actually a book called Gaia's Garden, and it's what they're going to do is and you must have noticed this in your lifetime, or in the last few years, about how they talk about everything in the green environment. Everything is just environmentally friendly. Everything you buy has to be organic. I mean, I've never seen anything such as organic manure, but I actually saw that sign, and they wanted $20 a yard instead of $15. But businesses get caught up in whatever they think is sellable, and they unintentionally carry forward some pretty bad stuff. We have practiced husbandry, although not necessarily correctly, forever. And in order to live, in order to eat, in order to survive, we had to have some husbandry. And they're trying to remove it, and technologically, when we got into agri-farming and some things, you have to admit there were some things that really didn't go all that well, but that's the process of learning. We went from the horse, and diphtheria was killing people in Chicago and Detroit and everywhere else, and we finally went to the car. Now they're going to get rid of the car completely, and you're going to go to a bicycle. Now, I'll be too old or dead, so it won't matter to me. I can ride a bike, but it doesn't appeal to me too much, but that's what they're interested in. But in the meantime, they are discussing in this, on the second page, the second paragraph says, one of the documents designed to advance the process is the long-awaited Earth Charter. Now, we're going to talk about that again in a second, but it really, if you go to the 4th chapter, and I'm just glancing through that, I made some marks, it's really going to be the new global ethic. So it's not going to be whether you have any Judeo-Christian faith. They don't care. It's not going to be whether there's Muslims or Hindus or Baptists. I don't know. My great-great-grandfather was a Congregationalist, and I never understood him, and I actually saw him once. I am what I would call a recovering Episcopalian, because my great-great ancestors were Quakers, and they got put in prison for not paying their tithing. So my wife goes to a Baptist church, and I go to a Baptist church, and we do our tithing and that sort of thing. But your ancestors believed that the Bible and that whole issue was individual, and you met at the church to do it together, but it was an individual science that you understood and depended on. I don't want to go any further into that one. If you read through this one, you're going to read about Stephen Rockefeller, who was part of the Rockefeller Foundation, and they're one of the ones that wrote this. And they basically say the only way to move forward is by integrating the Earth Charter into the kids' curriculum, because they're going to teach the kids. And all of these groups all come from the same place. It's the UN, essentially. They're going to ensure universal access to health care that fosters reproductive health and responsible reproduction, sort of like the Chinese, I think. Now, the key to this statement, and the reason I make this statement, is because it is imperative that you start learning code. Every group has code, and it's their syntax, it's their syntax of conversation. You have to synthesize their code. One of the reasons I'm putting these articles together is because I'm not telling you essentially where it is, but there's a code that moves throughout every one of these articles, and they all come together. kind of at the end, and I wanted to do it this way because I couldn't think of any better way to do it. I refuse to speak about something without attempting to give you some sort of vision about not only how you're getting where you're going, and that's what this is. It's sort of a game of catch-up, and or it's the 4 stages of grief. I don't know how you want to put it. It's like seeing your cat get run over. The first thing you do is just fall down in a faint, you know, and then you get mad at the guy who drove the car, and then you're sad because you got to bury it. And then pretty soon you're moving on, you know, because nothing you can do with the cat. It's dead. It's dead. You're going to put it in the ground, and pretty soon you got to go. Some people last a long time in this 4 stages, but if you're smart, you'll move along. But anyway, it's to catch you up and get you organized and help you understand all this. And it's not denigrating, because I know all of you have jobs. I mean, I know all of you have to work for a living. You all have kids to feed. You have a lot of other things to do. So I felt like my job was to bring a bunch of material here that you could see and synthesize and get together and understand. Okay, now, the next item in this little pamphlet is a list of the things that are considered unsustainable. Now, you're going to hear that word sustainable development, you know, sustainable this, sustainable that, you know, sustainable clothing, you know, burlap, whatever. You're going to get into all kinds of stuff, but this is an actual list, and the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report, directed by the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, which you will find throughout this group of articles, calls for urgent action to reverse the effects of this unsustainable human activity. Now, if you look down this is the pages that these items are on, and you'll notice these are page references. You're going to see ski runs, grazing of livestock for all you cattlemen, cows, sheep, goats, horses, disturbance of the soil surface, compaction of soil, reduced filtering, fencing, and then if you move to the next section, you're going to get agriculture at all. Now think about that. How can you stop agriculture? Who eats if you stop agriculture? Now, because of that statement, I want to take you back to the first page of the Oz versus reality. On the bottom of the second page, my 3 main goals would be to reduce human population to about 100 million worldwide, destroy the industrial infrastructure, and see wilderness with its full complement of species returning throughout the world. This is Dave Foreman, co-founder of Earth First. Now, in order to not get you thinking that I'm totally nuts, you'll notice that these are all on the green agenda, but you'll also notice the quotes are all available in every place. I think I got all the quotes on every one of them. So you can go back and actually look at the quote, because here's the thing, I don't want you believing me. You know, I'm done with that. You know, I had kids, now I got grandkids. My kids never believed me. I had to send them to Christian school or wherever, you know, I mean, just all of the stuff you have to do with your kids. And so, you know, I'm just telling you that I'm bringing this to you this way so that you won't be yelling at me after I leave, okay? Now, there's something really about this list. Where it says 728 to 783, you're going to see they kind of get carried away with the same things again. But one of the things they put on here that's really pretty interesting is human-made caves of brick and mortar. Now, to most of you with an IQ above 40, that's your house that you're living in. Okay, and that's what they mean. They mean concrete and steel, paved and tarred roads, highways, rails, railroads, harvesting of timber. That's an interesting one, you know. Private property, population growth, human population density. And on the next to the last line on 728 to 783, it's Judeo, Christian, and Islamic religions. They are going to get rid of them. And they're in the process right now. Why do you wonder Christianity's under assault? The reason Christianity's under assault is because, well, frankly, you know, Christianity provides some human rights, you know, and you can't honor, kill your wife or your kids or whatever all those other things are with those other religions. So first they're going to get rid of Judeo-Christianity, and then they'll let, you know, for instance, the Muslim Brotherhood or something kind of run things, and then they'll get rid of them. And there's no way people can go anywhere after all this is done. I mean, if you stop and think about this, I know it sounds really rather strange, but I put these together on purpose. And if you read through these, you'll get there the same way I am. And after I did that, I just realized I got 2 families below me and I got grandkids, and they're not going to go this way. It's just how it's going to work. So anyway, I started studying this issue about the global warming, and I ran into, in June, the next item that you're going to see is the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. It's a rather lengthy little tome. The title is actually, which was written by a scientist, a climatologist, it's called A Multidisciplinary Science-Based Approach to the Economics of Climate Change. I only brought the abstract because the report's like 49 pages, but the abstract tells it all, because if you look at the second paragraph, it's the first bullet point. It's CO2 emissions reductions on atmospheric CO2 appear to be short rather than long-lasting, meaning they can build all these fancy buildings and spend these huge amounts of money, which they're trying to do in Portland right now with a building called the Sustainability Center. It's going to run all by itself. It's going to have its own solar panels and its own sewer system and its own water collection basin, and they're going to filter it. And it's going to all be on its own. But the problem is, nobody else can do that, because they're going to put the light rail right underneath it. So, you get out and go to work, which would be fine, but how are you going to run a light rail everywhere? I mean, these people just don't understand the reality of life. Oriental Station and the Commons and all these buildings in Portland that are all close to the tracks are not successful. That's not the mindset of the industrial corporation people that we have in this society. The society that we have came from all over the world, and they came here because they wanted to be efficient, and they wanted to do things, they wanted to produce, and they wanted to create prosperity for their families. And we're just not into the French model and the Portuguese model or the Swiss model or those models. They all came here. I'm English, Irish, German, and a Mohawk Indian, actually. I can get into an argument before I even get to my first cup of coffee. So don't misunderstand. We're all immigrants to a sense. But the problem is that we came here to further an objective, and the UN is not interested in that. The UN, if anyone is really interested in this, and I did some research on it, but it gets really heavy. The court cases will tell you that the UN white papers that were written to start the UN were not written to benefit us. They never have been. The UN's not here to benefit us. It was here to use us as a tax base and a money base to help other countries and do other things. The only problem with it is the UN has grown in stature, and they want now to have a one world system. The Bilderbergers are meeting right now, and if you look at the parties, you can go on Google, and I suggest you do this, and look down the list, and you will see members of the parties in the Bilderberger system. And that means that they're bringing that stuff home. So I know this is stuff that is kind of up here at this point, but we're going to be locally here in just a second. In any case, Alan Carlin, who wrote this, who worked for the EPA, you can investigate him too, because his bio is online and everything's there for you. They wouldn't choose any of the alternatives to CO2 reduction because they wanted to do cap and trade in the greenhouse gas business. And that's all the way to just make money. And his last bullet is the one that's on the very first bullet on the back page. It says, the risk of catastrophic anthropogenic global warming appears to be so low that it's not currently worth doing anything to try to control it, including geoengineering. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not supposed to be doing our husbandry. It doesn't mean we're not supposed to try to save gas. You don't need to drive around with your foot on the floor all day long. But it means that there is no corporate basis. What he's saying is there's no corporate basis for greenhouse gas legislation and all the other baldy-roll that they're doing, because most of it is a backdoor way to control. Now, in order to move to the next part of that, I gave you in your booklet the executive summary from the Oregon Global Warming Commission, which is another commission that is running in the state of Oregon. And it was done through executive order, by the way, and there are 10 other executive orders, which if you stop and think about executive orders, which one of you wrote it? Now, nobody in this room's written one executive order. It's written by the governor and his group of individuals. And that happens on both sides of the house. But it happens when there's a Republican governor to some extent. It happens when there's a Democrat governor to some extent. But at least 10 executive orders have been involved in this global warming issue. And this executive summary is pretty self-explanatory. If you look on the back, you're going to get to their summary of key sector actions. And one of them is create complete communities. Now, when you read through the rest of those, the cost of implementing these things and so on, you're going to find out that a complete community is everybody's going to be off their farm and in the city. That's what the Chinese are doing, but there's just nobody living there. Problem is they have to do it backwards in the United States because everybody owns their property. So they have to figure out a way to remove it. And the way they're removing it is by, well, in Clackamas County, what they did is they put an ordinance, a tree ordinance, they called it. The tree ordinance blocks you from cutting a tree or doing anything else on your property. And in the case of, well, in the case of Portland, what they want to do is actually own your landscaping. That means they're not going to own your property, but they're going to own your landscaping, which is the same thing as shutting the door on your garage. You can't do anything. And fee simple title, how many of you know what fee simple title means? I really want to see a group of hands here. Okay, well, you don't have it anymore. The minute they put an ordinance on there, you don't have it. The reason is because the ordinance can overrun your fee simple title. In Australia, there is a report, and you can write this down because this one is in existence. It's called the Maynes Report, M-A-Y-N-E-S. The Maynes Report documents the fact that Queensland, I believe it is, nobody has any fee simple title rights anymore. They've lost them all. And now there are arguments between the landscaping group, the I don't want you to move your soil group, you know, the non-tarred road group, and people have lost all their rights. But they still pay their taxes. They still have to take their house and take care of it, and the bank still holds the paper. But a group called the Bigelow Corporation, and you can Google it, it's there, runs your property and owns it, actually owns it. I mean, you don't own it anymore. So that's one of the things they're trying to do, and they're going to do it in this country by just putting so many ordinances over your property, and I'll get to one in here in a minute. But there's a couple other ones in here. Increased nutrient use efficiency. That means change what you eat. Increased carbon sequestration in crop management. Now this is all printed right on the Oregon State website. So advocate for carbon price signals, which means they're just really hot on the carbon tax. Standards, incentives, and or mandates for carbon footprinting. Establish higher standards for new buildings, net zero plus offsets for materials. Now, if you really stop and think about, I'll get to that when I get to Portland. Just bear with me for a second. The city of Eugene is an ICLEI city. There are other ICLEI cities. I think there's about 7 of them in the state of Oregon. Ashland, okay. Now, what nobody really understands about an ICLEI city is you just agreed to the UN. Now, everybody says, no, they didn't. They say, no. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, actually, there's a 3-click challenge on the internet you can take, which will take you right there. But this is the City of Eugene's ICLEI contract, and they're in their charter, and you can Google this, and like I said, it's not up to me, Charter 1.7 Principles. The association shall promote and ask its individual members to adopt the following Earth Charter principles. Now, where I came from, that means if you're buying a car, you just took the contract. If you're buying a house, you just took the contract. And there are really interesting items. Item 7 is adopt patterns of production, consumption, and reproduction that safeguard Earth's regenerative capacities. None of this has anything to do with humanity. It all has to do with the environment and saving the earth from itself. And this, by the way, you can get right offline. It's totally available, but the reason I brought it to you is because I don't want you to have to waste your time. And usually they'll tell you on the bottom where they came from. The next item that you'll see in your packet is a group of notes that were pulled off the Portland and Multnomah County Action Plan for 2009. The reason I bring this up is because Metro is trying to increase, Metro, which is Washington County, Multnomah County, and Clackamas County, is trying to build it in a smaller way with Eugene, Springfield, and something else. And forgive me because I don't live there, but there's a map for it. You can see it. It's called Lane Livable Communities. And here's what they want to do. They want to do an 80% reduction of the carbon emissions. Now, that is tantamount to not driving a car at all. Okay? Nobody driving a car. So the only way you can do that is you either live a hell of a lot closer to your business, or you're going to walk, or you're going to ride a train, or and if you read, though, if you go back into what's that, sustainable? Railroads. So what are you going to ride on? I mean, they're duplicitous. They're just giving you feel-good stuff until they pull the trigger. And it's fortunate for us, if you keep paying attention to the Chinese, that the Chinese are trying to figure out how to do it without showing us. Because the cities already exist. They're there. They're huge. And there is not a person living in any of them. But they just haven't figured out how to do it quietly. So anyway, they're working on it though. Don't worry, they'll figure it out. Okay. Disparity among our residents can be reduced by ensuring the communities most vulnerable to climate change, which doesn't mean anything. It means, you know, the poverty rates and the rest of them are going to get help. And they're going to do that by creating vibrant neighborhoods where 90% of the Portland residents and 80% of Multnomah County residents can easily walk or bicycle to meet all their daily basic needs. This is it. Anyway, you going. Motivate all Multnomah County residents and businesses to change their behavior in ways that reduce carbon emissions, which includes change how you eat. If you go to the next page on here, page 45, this is taken off of pages so that you could go back and do that. They're going to regulate 20-minute neighborhoods. Anybody know what a 20-minute neighborhood is? That's a farthest place you can be from your work. So God help you if you work in Grants Pass, you know, or someplace else, you know. That's what they want. And it says right here, help establish at least 2 new transportation management associations and parking management districts, 15 miles of bicycle boulevards. Now, page 47, 48, and 9 is they're going to publicly manipulate to influence your consumptive purchases, which means no more ding-dongs. You know, that's what they're going to do. And it tells you discussions about what goods to consume and how to dispose of them heavily influence Portland and Multnomah County's carbon emissions. Everything is carbon emissions. It's their excuse because carbon is a necessary ingredient in the growth process. I don't know if anybody even know that, but it is. And, you know, all you farmers have got to know that. You know, you plant nitrogen fixers in your ground, on your fallow ground, and you grow something else the next year, and it is a naturally occurring process. Anyway, this isn't the end of the world. The thing that must happen, though, is that it's imperative that you get to know who your city councilors are. For instance, in Lane County, the city went into this. The county has not gone into this. And the reason they didn't is people went to them and just said, no, absolutely not. 1,000 of them. You know, that's pretty well shook them up because they didn't have a room big enough to deal with them. So they started checking things out. And what they had is one woman, and this is why it doesn't take a lot of people. This is really an important point. She happened to be on the budget committee of Lane County. And she just simply said, you better check the economics of this because this is going to be horrific if you do it. And all of a sudden, every one of the city councilors, and I mean, not the councilors, they were doomed, but the commissioners, they went whoop, and so they started looking around. They stopped the essence of going into Italy. But now what's happening is coming in behind them is a thing called livable communities. The livable communities. And if you Google online Lane County, you're going to get Livable Lane County. And what it'll have is a NGO, non-governmental organization group that is managing all this. That means not one of you would be involved, and you would not vote on it. And that's how it works. And they'll show you the picture of them right there in the front. It's real pretty. It's got, mass transit and St. Vincent de Paul, of all places, and these are well-intended people, but they don't understand what you have and the information that I've given you and what it means. And so there are a couple things that will be really beneficial to you to understand. One is the initiative process. Maybe I've already told you about this, but the Oregon legislature put this in on purpose because of this kind of power grab by the legislature. It only takes 10%, and you'll have to verify this, but I think it only takes 10% of the registered voters that voted to do an initiative. Now, if you had a 25%, and here's the trick, if you had a 25% voting record for this last one, and you've got, 70,000 people. I'm not good at math. This is why I escaped high school, but somebody that's good at math would be able to say that that's like, 4,000 people? Anyway. You understand that this is the time to do an initiative because you don't have to get very many people. You only have to get 10% of the registered voters that voted. Now, that's not very many. So what you do is you do an initiative. And Lane County's in the process of doing this. The Republicans in Lane County, and I have more information that I can get to the director and the co-director of AFP here in Jackson County, and pass more information to you, and I have a website, and I'll give you more websites when we're done. They're very easy to deal with, and very instructive, but they're writing an amendment to the Lane County Charter, and it's right here. It's only one page, back to back. And they're going to do, if they have to, they're going to do an initiative, but they think they know two of the commissioners well enough that one of them will put it forth, and then force a vote. And that would lock out the UN and all of its subtle agencies. That's one way to do this, yes.
Yeah, so what happens when they get the initiative and then these groups go to court and then the court just throws it out? That's what's been happening.
Can't do it.
Why not?
Well, because, here's, and I'm not going to say you don't have a point, but that typically at that level has not been done. And this does not denigrate anyone or do anything. It just says what the Oregon Constitution says in Article 11, Section 16, I believe, says that cities, counties, and municipalities cannot have association with any business or anything else where there's a passing of money. In order to join ICLA, you have to give them money, you subscribe. And then you take their charter because you have to agree to it or you can't subscribe. Now that's a locking mechanism. That's like contracting for mowing mowing all of the city public works and stuff. You can't do that. And so it's one of the ways that you bring it forward. And that's how you bring it forward. And the other thing is that you must understand that while we have a lot of Democratic judges, and it puts a lot of power on their side, if one of these actually was agreed to and it was successful in a court challenge, they're hosed. It's over for them. This could be passed around to the rest of the counties in an hour, and it would not be refuted by any county.
Do you have copies of that?
Everybody that has a packet has one. Now, it has to be changed. It's got Lane County in it and everything, but anybody who's reasonably astute, who has a friend who went to law school or is currently going to law school, but not the University of Oregon, for God's sakes, you'd be okay. Okay? Now, The other thing is, there are a couple of other ways to deal with this, and I think one of them is kind of, it's not too late. What you really have to do is understand who you elected. Frankly, most people don't. They don't know who they elected. They don't know what they do. And as long as they didn't burn down their house or something, they didn't really care. The problem with it is these people don't know what they're doing, and they're entering into agreements such as this livable Lane counties. I will use it as my example. If the county agrees to just agree that they want to kind of be a partner to this group, they took every one of those rules with them, and they're all federal. And every one of those federal rules is attached to all of the things they then do. And if you look at the Lane counties, the livable community site for Lane County, you will see that EPA is outside their constitutional jurisdiction. HUD, Department of Agriculture, DOT, they're all in this together, and they're giving them the money. Now, your average county commissioner, city councilman wants to be liked, you know, even though that may be an issue. But the fact is that they'll take the money because they think it makes them look good. They do not read the fine print, and that's where you guys come in. Somebody has to start helping them with the fine print a little bit. And the way that works is that it's sort of, well, military intelligence is an oxymoron to anybody who's ever been in the military. But the point is, intelligence is valuable. And the way you gain your intelligence is you just go in and talk to them. I have talked to every county, and I don't mean I as a, it really doesn't have anything to do with me, but what I mean is I had the time. So I went in and talked to every Lane County commissioner and took them this packet and took them all the material, and I talked to them for 20 minutes, and I said, you've got to pay attention economically, because this is going to own you if you start messing around. I think they're taking it to heart. I'm going to make sure that every county commissioner in Jackson County, if I have enough left, and every city councilman, or you can take them in and explain to them, write a cover letter on it, and just sit with them and say, do you understand this? And if you do, you need an answer from them. You see, the problem that we have is if they don't like what you ask them, they don't answer you, and then you go home anyway. No longer can we do that. And I will use my dear friend in the back row, Greg Walden's man, and I appreciate him being here, but I've been talking to Riley and LeGrand now for months. And my point is that they're busy, and this is an uncomfortable subject. And I have the greatest respect for Greg Walden. God, I wish he was in the 2nd district, or 5th district. He's in the 2nd district. Just to tell you an aside, Kurt Schrader is our representative, and I know the guy. I mean, I took my animals to his veterinary clinic, you know, for a long time. Well, not anymore. And that's another way you're going to do this. I mean, he's just not working for the people. Once they get in there, they get turned. It's like the Augusta Country Club. And they're all together, and they'll all protect each other before they'll let them get hammered by the public, because they have forgotten who owns them. The fact is, you own them. So I wouldn't do this with Representative Walden, but you have to write a succinct letter and then take it to him. You know, this is my example. Take it to him so that he can put it in his executive packet so that it doesn't wait 2 months while it's getting sniffed for anthrax, you know, which is what goes on up there. They sniff them for anthrax. He's nodding. Okay, you know, because they don't know who's going to blow them up, a letter bomb, whatever, you know. And there's a reason for some of those things, I think, once in a while. But anyway, I think somebody needs to take Weeder's cell phone, you know. I mean, this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that you just got to understand the mentality that works up there and kind of play by their rules. And one of the other things you can do here is set up I mean, you're all wonderful people for even being here and bothering to listen to me. My kids didn't listen to me, so I mean, I'm really grateful that you're here, you know, and actually listening. But how many of you could write a letter to the editor? And really just, maybe 2 of you put your hands up just to make me feel good, okay? Okay, now, all right, what's going to happen is you are really important. And the reason is because how many times, I mean, if you even take the paper, look, my cousin writes for the Oregonian. He works for the Oregonian, and I still will not buy that paper. I hate that paper. And I tell him that every time I see him. I make him sit next to me so I can tell him that. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that 2 or 3 letters to the editor's writers are critical. And if you're not comfortable with it for sure, then find somebody in this group who could edit it and make it look better. I mean, there must be somebody who does textual writing, or must be a teacher. Probably not a teacher. I don't know. I got to be really careful. But my point is you're going to have to get active. The reason I'm here is because every time I've got called for a boat call, do you think I can say, well, I don't think I'm going to go today because the weather doesn't look too good? No. You go. And frankly, I spent 40 years in surgery getting around it. And so you guys can at least write a letter to the editor, okay? It's not that hard to do. Once you do one, it's pretty simple. And they are critical because what happens is the newspaper has to figure out what to do with them. And if they're not going to publish them and they keep showing up, they got a problem. Because then you've got there the sign, I mean, just 2 people, you know, younger ones, find younger ones, you know, you can pay them, you know. Like they got the mattress guys all over the place, you know. Just take them out there and pay them $5 an hour and have them walk in front of the newspaper with a sign that says censorship, you know. That's what they've been doing. Now, why hasn't, I mean, all I'm saying is nobody thinks about it. It isn't you don't think about it, but you're good people. The good people issue's got to end because the other guys aren't. And they don't care what you think. I know that. They don't care what you think. Look at it, next time you're on television, I know I'm sorry I'm taking so long. The next time you get on TV, look at it. If they show you Brazil or any other country, look at the shacks that go up the hillside. And then realize that the only person, the lucky person, is the guy on top, because there are no toilets. And the only thing that anybody owns is a roof that the guy is living on above them. That's why they live that way. That's why the Chinese are building all those buildings. We're one of the few countries left in the world that even has private property rights. And we're losing them, and it's because you have to sometimes go up and kick the messenger, you know, or protect your interests, and it's vital. And so the letters to the editor's writings, just coordinate. Create yourself a little Wednesday morning coffee. I don't know what day your paper comes out, but create a little coffee class, you know, and kind of get together and visit. It's a good time. Anyway, and then write a couple of letters to the editor on something that's going on and start pushing the other guy out of the paper. You see, then it starts making sense to the people like you that are not able to get here or do something like this. It happens. And so, I could go on way too long. I don't even know how long I've been speaking, but it's probably too late.
Yeah, I'd like to get followed.
I apologize for taking too long, but understand that if we don't do something, and I'm serious, it's going to be an issue, and I just don't want it to be on my watch. Maybe after I'm dead, you know. And I'm not going anytime soon, folks, because I made it through 28 years of running boats.
How do we contact you? Are you on one of these papers?
No, but can I do one more thing? Mm-hmm. Okay, a couple things. Thank you very much, and I'll give you my card personally. On the front of the booklet, it says "Prepared by Freedom Advocates." See that? Okay, they are a premier group, very educationally oriented, very strong, and they can be of immense help to you. The other one is the Green Agenda. That's a very good website. And if you look at most of these papers, a couple of them don't have, okay, the Cost of Sustainable Development tells you who it is. It's got sovereignty.net on the bottom. Real News 24/7 did the new world religion, and other things I can help you find, and I can help get you on sites that will make things easier to understand, and there's ways to deal with. So one of the things that was hardest for me was to just not want to go bury my head, but you know the old rule with that one. It puts the other end of you in the air. Yes, sir.
You were talking about the UN and all this poison stuff.
Yeah.
But the biggest countries in the world are not in the UN, right? China's not in the UN?
No, they're in it.
They are?
They run it. Here's the problem.
What about India and what about Russia?
They're all in.
They're all in it. Yeah, and it's okay. I can understand why you would think this way, but listen, they have a thing. They have, first of all, a rotating titular head chairman, and it's been people like Saddam Hussein, and I mean it's just nuts. The Security Council is actually, I don't know, they're trying to make it 7, but right now it's 5. It's China, the United States, Great Britain, Russia, and who else? France?
Probably France.
Huh? Yeah, France. Probably France. France is an old country. And they, if one of them votes against them, it doesn't happen. So that means we've got to think about this, because the United States has been voting for some of this themselves. It's one of the reasons your party affiliate, your party, you better start looking at your parties. As far as I'm concerned, the Republican Party likes cheap labor, and the Democratic Party likes the ballot box. That's about as clean as I can make it, and without offending anyone. I don't mean to. My great-grandfather was a Supreme Court Justice in the state of Oregon. He is a liberal Democrat. And those are different today, and they don't explain the difference, so you don't know the difference. But anyway, thank you all for being so willing to talk.